In the winter of 1892, a 61-year-old orchardman in eastern Oregon began lighting a lamp in his kitchen window every Thursday at dusk. Not for himself, not for the road. For a woman 27 years younger who had never promised to come. He told himself it was habit. He told himself the evenings were dark early. He told himself a lamp in a window was a practical thing. But Silas Ward had lived alone for 14 years, and a man who lives alone that long does not accidentally set two plates on the table. Larkspur was a small town tucked between wheat ground, timber slopes, and the kind of cold that did not arrive loudly. It simply settled in, pressed its weight against the doors, and waited to be respected. Silas Ward owned 40 acres of apple trees 9 miles north of town. His father had planted the first rows when Oregon still felt half wild, and Silas had grafted the rest by hand, one branch at a time, until the orchard stood in clean, patient lines behind his house. The trees made sense to him. They did not flatter, they did not hurry. They told the truth if a man knew how to read them. A dry summer showed in the bark. A harsh winter showed in the buds. A careless cut showed for years. Silas liked that. People were harder. His wife, Ellen, had died 14 winters earlier. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way that gave grief a single door to walk through and close behind it. She had weakened by inches. A cough, a fever. A chair moved closer to the stove. Then a bed moved into the front room. Then silence. After Ellen, Silas did what men in Larkspur expected other men to do. He worked. He pruned in February. He thinned fruit in June. He pressed cider in October. He attended church on Sunday and bought flour on Wednesday, and answered questions with enough civility that no one could accuse him of bitterness. But the house had gone narrow. That was the only word for it. The rooms had not changed size. The roof had not lowered. The walls had not moved. Still, everything inside felt narrower than it used to. Then Lydia Marlowe came to Larkspur. She arrived in September on the stage from Baker City with 2 trunks, 6 books tied in cloth, and a black hat that made half the town decide she was proud before she had spoken 3 sentences. She was 34 years old, which in Larkspur made her old enough to be practical and young enough to be discussed. The school trustees had hired her after the last teacher married a sheepman and moved west without finishing the term. Lydia took the schoolhouse keys, inspected the cracked windows, found the pump handle loose, and asked the first reasonable-looking man she saw where a person might find an honest blacksmith. That man was Silas Ward. He had come to town for lamp oil, nails, and a new whetstone. Lydia stood on the schoolhouse step with the pump handle in one gloved hand. "Excuse me," she said. "Do you know who repairs things in this town without making them worse?" Silas looked at the pump handle, then at her. Then back at the pump handle. "Jonah Pike," he said. "Blacksmith, 1 street over. Tell him Silas Ward sent you, and he'll only overcharge you a little." Her mouth moved before she decided whether to smile. "Only a little is a comfort." "It is, in Larkspur." "I'm Lydia Marlowe. I teach here." "I figured." "And you are?" "Silas Ward, Orchard North Road." "I figured," she said. That was all. 20 seconds, maybe less. Silas rode home with lamp oil, nails, a whetstone, and the uncomfortable suspicion that the day had acquired a second meaning without asking his permission. He did not see Lydia again for 2 weeks. He heard about her, of course. In a town like Larkspur, A woman could not buy chalk without producing 3 interpretations of her character. Mrs. Bell at the Mercantile said Lydia had a fine hand for discipline. The church deacon said she asked too many questions at the trustees' meeting. Jonah Pike said she paid her bill promptly and did not pretend not to understand tools. Claude Emery, the county clerk's nephew, sent her sugared pears in a ribboned basket. Lydia accepted the pears, sliced them at school, and gave them to the children during arithmetic. Claude did not send a second basket. Silas did not ask about any of this. He only happened, on the first Wednesday in October, to mention to Jonah Pike that a pump handle ought to stay repaired once repaired. Jonah looked at him over the rim of a horseshoe. It stayed repaired. Good. She asked if you always speak in weather reports. Silas paused. What did you say? I said mostly. Silas bought his nails and left. Jonah laughed only after the door closed. Lydia came to the orchard in late October. She had 4 boys from the school with her, all of them carrying slates and the solemn expression of children who had been told to behave around someone old. Silas was on a ladder, cutting dead wood from a Spitzenberg tree when he heard them at the gate. Mr. Ward? Lydia called. The class is studying grafting. I was told your trees are the only ones in the county that understand manners. Silas looked down. Trees don't have manners. No, she said, but they do seem to obey you. That isn't the same thing. I was hoping you would explain the difference. He should have said no. Not because he disliked children. Not because he disliked Lydia Marlowe. Because the afternoon had been properly arranged before she arrived, and Silas Ward had reached an age where properly arranged afternoons felt safer than unexpected ones. Instead, he climbed down. He showed the boys how one branch could carry another if the cut was clean and the binding held. He explained rootstock. He explained patience. He explained that a graft looked weak at first because most good things did. Lydia stood behind the boys and listened with the stillness of a person who did not merely wait for information, but received it. That unsettled him more than the questions did. When the children left, one boy forgot his cap. Lydia came back for it while Silas was wiping sap from his knife. You are good with them, she said. With trees? With boys pretending not to care? Trees are easier. She laughed then, not politely, not carefully. A real laugh, quick as a match struck in a dark room. Most things are, she said. After that, she returned on Thursdays. At first, there was always a reason, a lesson on pruning, a question about cider pressing, a request for apple cuttings for the school garden, a book about botany she claimed Silas might find useful, though he had read it years ago and disagreed with a third of it. By November, the reasons became thinner. By December, Silas stopped asking for them. That was when the lamp began. Every Thursday near dusk, he would light the kitchen lamp and place it in the front window facing the north road. Then he would put soup on the stove. Then, without allowing himself to think directly about it, he would take 2 plates from the cupboard. The first time Lydia noticed, she said nothing. She removed her gloves, warmed her hands near the stove, looked at the second plate, looked at the lamp, then looked at Silas. He looked at the wood box as if it had made all the decisions. Cold evening, he said. Yes, she said. A lamp helps. It does. So does soup. It was already made. I never doubted it. The barn cat, Cinder, pushed the door open with his shoulder, inspected both of them, and immediately left again. Your cat has opinions, Lydia said. Too many. About me? About everyone. He approves? Silas watched the cat disappear into the hall. He didn't bite you. A generous endorsement. Silas almost smiled. Almost was not much, but in that house it was more than had happened in years. The town noticed in the way towns notice quiet things more sharply than loud ones. A lamp in a window, a teacher riding north after school, an orchardman buying tea when everyone knew he drank coffee. Two figures seen walking between winter bare apple rows while the sky turned iron gray. Mrs. Bell thought it was sweet and said so too often. The deacon thought it was unwise and said so carefully. Claude Emery thought it was humiliating and said nothing carefully at all. He found Silas outside the Mercantile one raw afternoon in December. I hear Miss Marlowe spends time at your orchard, Claude said. Silas tied a flour sack to his saddle. She brings the school children sometimes. Not always. Silas pulled the knot tight. No. Claude waited for embarrassment. Silas gave him none. She is 34, Claude said. You're past 60. 61. That was not the point. It was the only number you mentioned. Claude's face went red. Silas mounted his horse and rode home with the flour, the tea, and a temper he refused to name. Cinder met him at the porch and stared. I know, Silas told the cat. Cinder blinked slowly. No, I don't need your help. The cat followed him inside anyway. What Silas did not know was that Lydia had already heard worse. The school trustees had begun to discuss propriety, which was the word men used when they wanted to control a woman without admitting they were afraid of her choices. One trustee suggested that her visits north of town might damage confidence in the school. Lydia asked, whose confidence? The trustee said, parents. Lydia asked, which parents? He looked at the table. No names came. That did not make the wound smaller. By the following Thursday, Silas had heard enough. Not the whole thing, enough. A warning from the deacon, a careful remark from Mrs. Bell, a look from Claude Emery that was too pleased with itself. Silas went home and did something he had not done since October. He did not light the lamp. The kitchen darkened by degrees. The soup cooled. The second plate stayed in the cupboard. Silas sat at the table with his hands folded and told himself he was doing the honorable thing. It sounded noble. That was why it was dangerous. A man can hide a great deal of fear inside the word honorable. Cinder sat on the windowsill beside the unlit lamp and stared at him with deep disapproval. Don't start, Silas said. The cat remained. I am protecting her. The cat flicked one ear. You don't know anything about it. Cinder put one paw on the lamp base. Silas looked away. Nearly an hour after dusk, hoofbeats stopped at the yard gate. Silas closed his eyes. He had expected her not to come. He had also known, in the private place where truth gathers before a man is ready, that she would. Lydia opened the kitchen door without knocking. Snow dusted the shoulders of her coat. Her cheeks were red from the ride. In one hand, she held a folded paper. It was the note Silas had sent through a schoolboy that morning. She placed it on the table, unopened. Your lamp is out, she said. Silas stood. I thought it best. For whom? He looked at the note. For you. No, she said. Try again. The room was very quiet. I am too old to be the reason people speak against you. People already speak against me. They speak against any woman who chooses something before being assigned it. Lydia, you may finish in a moment, but first you will hear me plainly. She removed her gloves one finger at a time, not because she was calm, but because she intended to become calm. I did not come here because you are young. You are not. I noticed. Despite himself, Silas looked at her. She stepped closer. I did not come because you are convenient. You are 9 miles from town and difficult in conversation. Cinder jumped down from the sill and vanished under the stove. Coward, Silas thought. Lydia continued. I came because you tell the truth, because you listen without trying to own the answer, because you light a lamp before you admit you are waiting, because you set out a plate and then pretend the cupboard did it. Silas said nothing. The wind moved against the house. You are counting years, she said. I am counting evidence. That line found him. It went past his defenses because it did not attack them. It simply named them. He sat down slowly. Lydia sat across from him. Then, because she had carried her own story long enough, she told him about Portland, about the man she had almost married. Arthur Bellamy, a lawyer with fine gloves, good prospects, and a future already arranged so neatly that Lydia had begun to feel like a chair placed in the correct room. Arthur had not been cruel. That had made it harder. Cruelty gives a person permission to leave. Expectation does not. 3 weeks before the wedding, Lydia had stood in a dressmaker's room while 2 women discussed the color of ribbons she had not chosen, for a house she did not want, beside a man who preferred her agreeable. She had looked at herself in the mirror and realized she was disappearing politely. So she ended it. Her mother wept. Arthur was astonished. His family was offended in 3 different households. And Lydia took a teaching post in Larkspur because it was the first decision that felt like her own. When she finished, Silas looked at the unlit lamp. You left a suitable man, he said. I left a finished cage. And came here, yes, to teach children with cracked slates and argue with trustees, among other blessings. His mouth moved, not a smile exactly, but nearer than before. Why me? He asked. Lydia's expression softened. Because with you, I do not have to shrink to fit the room. That was the darkest moment for Silas, though no one in town would have recognized it as such. No gunshot, no storm breaking the roof, no terrible sickness, just a woman offering him the truth, and a lamp sitting cold between them, and the knowledge that he had nearly mistaken fear for kindness. He reached for the matchbox. His hand stopped. Not because he did not want to light the lamp, because he understood, finally, that lighting it now would mean answering. Lydia watched him. Silas struck the match. The lamp caught. Warm light filled the glass. Cinder emerged from under the stove with the irritating confidence of a creature who believed the household had returned to sanity. Lydia looked at the flame, then at Silas. Thank you, she said. For the lamp? For not letting the dark make the decision. He did not propose that night. Silas Ward was not a man who crossed a bridge simply because he had found it. He tested the boards. He studied the current. He considered every foolish way a man could fall. For 3 days he worked badly. He pruned branches that did not need pruning. He fed the stove twice when it was already hot. He asked Cinder 3 separate questions and received no useful counsel. On the 4th morning, he opened the small cedar box where he kept Ellen's ring. He had not touched it in years, not because he had forgotten, because some things become so important in memory that a person stops knowing how to hold them in life. The ring lay wrapped in a square of cloth beside 2 dry apple seeds Ellen had saved the spring before she fell ill. Silas sat with the box in his hands until the room brightened. Then he saddled his horse and rode to town. On a Monday. Not Thursday. Monday. That detail traveled through Larkspur faster than smoke. Mrs. Bell saw him pass the mercantile and whispered, "At last." Jonah Pike stepped out of the blacksmith shop and said nothing, which for Jonah required effort. Claude Emery watched from the clerk's office and looked as though a legal principle had failed him. Silas stopped at the schoolhouse. Lydia was alone inside, correcting copybooks by the stove. She looked up when he knocked. "It's Monday," she said. "I know." "You do not come on Mondays." "I know that too." She set down her pencil. "Should I be worried?" "Likely." "About you?" "Mostly." That made her smile. He came inside and removed his hat. For a moment, he saw the whole room. The small desks, the iron stove, the map curling at one corner. The pump handle by the door, now firm on its post, no longer loose in anybody's hand. It seemed impossible that so much of his life could have turned on such ordinary things. A broken pump, a grafted branch, a lamp, a plate. He stood before her desk. "I have been counting incorrectly," he said. Lydia folded her hands. "That sounds serious." "It has been." "And what number betrayed you?" "My age, mostly." "Ah." "I treated it like a verdict." "It is not." "No," he said. "It is a fact. But a fact is not always a verdict." She grew very still. Silas reached into his coat and took out the ring. "I loved Ellen," he said quietly. "I know. I will love her until I die. I would think less of you if you did not." His hand closed around the ring. "But loving what was has become my excuse for refusing what is." Lydia's eyes shone, though she did not look away. Silas placed the ring on the desk between them. "I am 61 years old. I own an orchard that needs work in every season. I am stubborn before breakfast and worse when tired. My cat is disrespectful. My house is too quiet. My future is shorter than yours." He took a breath. "But if you can bear the truth of all that, Lydia Marlowe, I would be honored beyond words if you would marry me." The schoolroom held its breath. Outside, somewhere in town, a wagon wheel creaked over frozen ruts. Lydia looked at the ring, then at him. "Silas Ward," she said, "you make a proposal sound like a weather report and a confession at the same time." "Is that bad?" "No." She stood. "It is entirely yours." He waited, because even then, even after riding 9 miles on a Monday, with his heart striking hard against his ribs, Silas Ward could wait for a clear answer. Lydia came around the desk. "Yes," she said. He closed his eyes once. Only once. Then he put Ellen's ring on Lydia's hand. Not as a replacement, not as a theft from the dead, as a passage. Some love ends by vanishing. Some love ends by teaching the living how to love again. This was the second kind. They were married in March, when the first green appeared at the ends of the apple branches. Lydia wore a dark green dress because she said white was too easy to ruin, and because green suited a woman beginning something on purpose. Half of Larkspur crowded into the church. Mrs. Bell cried before the vows. Jonah Pike pretended to cough. The deacon performed the service with the careful dignity of a man who had revised his opinion but preferred not to announce it. Claude Emery attended from the back pew and behaved well enough to disappoint anyone hoping for drama. Cinder was not allowed in the church. Cinder appeared anyway, under the steps, and later accepted wedding scraps as though they were tribute. The orchard house changed slowly, not all at once. That was important. Lydia did not sweep Ellen out of the rooms. Silas did not pretend the past had been empty. They moved through the house the way careful people move through a room with sleeping children. Quietly, respectfully, then with more noise as they learned what could bear it. Lydia brought books, dried flowers, a blue teapot, and the habit of opening curtains early. Silas built her a writing desk from apple wood. He sanded it twice, then a third time because he found one rough place near the edge. Lydia ran her hand over it and said, "This is the finest love letter I have ever received." Silas looked alarmed. "It is a desk." "I know. I used dowels." "I noticed." "That's not a letter." "It is from you." He considered this for a long moment. Then he said, "The drawer sticks a little. I love that part too." He did not understand her, but he believed her. That was enough. No children came to them. For a while, Silas carried a private sorrow over it, mostly because he thought Lydia might be carrying a larger one. Then one autumn evening, he found her in the orchard teaching 3 schoolchildren how to twist apple stems without bruising the fruit. She looked up at him with leaves in her hair and a basket at her feet. "Do you see them?" she asked. "The children?" The room got bigger, and he understood. Their house filled anyway, with pupils who stayed for supper, with farm girls who needed books their parents would not buy, with boys who came for grafting lessons and left knowing how to apologize, with travelers caught in weather, with widows who preferred Lydia's tea to their own silence, with Jonah Pike on Sundays whether invited or not. The lamp stayed in the kitchen window, not every night, only when someone was expected or hoped for. Years passed the way years do when they are lived properly. Not gently, exactly, but with enough meaning to make their weight welcome. Silas turned 70, then 71. His hair went fully white. His hands stiffened in winter. He could no longer climb the tall ladders without Lydia standing below, with an expression that made argument unwise. But he could still judge a graft by touch. He could still tell a storm 2 hours before it crossed the ridge. He could still make a frightened child believe a mistake was not the end of learning. On their 10th spring together, Larkspur held a school picnic in the orchard. The trees were in blossom. White petals moved through the air like slow snow. Children ran between the rows. Women spread cloths on the grass. Jonah Pike fell asleep under a tree and denied it when awakened. Cinder, old and round and more tyrant than Cat, occupied the best chair on the porch. Lydia stood beside Silas near the first tree his father had planted. "Do you remember the night you put the lamp out?" she asked. Silas looked at her. "I remember many mistakes. You'll need to be specific. That one. Yes. What did you think would happen? I thought darkness would make things simpler. And did it? No. He watched a boy show a younger child how to bind a graft with cloth. Not perfectly, but carefully. Darkness only hid what was already true. Lydia leaned her shoulder against his. And the lamp? He looked toward the house, where the kitchen window caught afternoon light, though no flame burned inside it. The lamp told on me. She laughed softly. Good. That evening, after everyone had gone, and the orchard settled into the blue hush before night, Silas lit the kitchen lamp. Not because Lydia was coming. She was already there, washing cups at the sink, humming under her breath. He lit it because somewhere on the road, someone might be looking for a sign that a door could still open. Lydia saw him set the lamp in the window. She said nothing at first, then she dried her hands and came to stand beside him. You once thought 61 was too late, she said. I was very confident for a wrong man. You were. Kind of you to remember. I remember accurately. Outside, the apple rose darkened. Inside, the lamp made a small gold circle on the glass. Silas put his hand over hers, the same hand that had held a pump handle, a book, a ring, 1,000 ordinary things that had become the proof of a life. He had not become young. That was never the miracle. His knees still ached, his hair still whitened. The calendar had not apologized or turned back. But the house was no longer narrow. The road no longer ended at his gate. The years he had left were not fewer because Lydia shared them. They were larger. That was what he had failed to count. A person can make an error out of grief and call it wisdom. A town can mistake arithmetic for truth. A heart can sit in a dark room for years and still know what to do when someone strikes a match. Silas Ward did not get a second youth. He got something better. A life that had room for the years already lived and room for the light still willing to come through. The lamp stayed. The darkness did not.